Hi everyone, and we are back. Actually, I was going to take like a week for resting, take a bit of the time off from the video, but then I thought this is going to be the last book of the series. Might as well stay and finish it off. And I'm going to do exactly that. I would be finishing off Percy Jackson and the last Olympian, which we would be starting today. And I can take a break later. I am actually going through a very hectic time, but if I leave this, I'm never going to go back to this. So might as well finish it off. So let's get started. Most people, we're reading obviously the synopsis back here. Most people get presents on their 16th birthday. I get a prophecy that could save or destroy the world. That's how it is when you're the son of Poseidon, god of the sea. According to an ancient prophecy, bad things will happen when I turn 16 because I'm the one who gets to decide the fate of the entire world. But no pressure. This is the one where Kronos, Lord of Titans, is beginning his attack on New York City, where Mount Olympus stands virtually unguarded. Oh, and the dreaded, and not to mention enormous, monster Typhoon is also heading our way. So it's me and 40 of my demigod friends versus untold evil. Can Percy stop the rampage of the Titans to save Olympus and himself? Question mark, question mark, question mark, question mark. Also, we all know the answer is yes, he would save people because he is still going strong, and I would try to get my hands on the rest of Rick Riordan books because he really writes well. So let's get started with Percy Jackson and the Last Olympian. Cover is gorgeous, I must say. I really wish that it had more setback in the back pages here, but then again I need to buy those special edition books to get this, and I could barely have this. So this has 23 chapters, so I'm literally going to do just what I did with the last one chapter at a time, because this book is thick. I mean, not thick, but it is thick enough to tell me that the chapters would be longer, and we don't know which ones, so one chapter at a time it is. Chapter 1. Go cruising with explosives. It's the boy starts right off the bat, doesn't he? He just The end of the world started when a Pegasus landed on the hood of my car. Up until then, I was having a great afternoon. Technically, I wasn't supposed to be driving because I wouldn't turn 16 for another week. But my mom and my stepdad Paul took my friend Rachel and me to this private stretch of beach on the South Shore, and Paul let us borrow his Prius for a short spin. I do not like the idea of this. I do get possessive about my ships, especially Percy and Annabeth, so yes, him driving around with Rachel alone isn't setting well with me. Now I know what you're thinking. Wow, that was really irresponsible of him, blah blah blah. But Paul knows me pretty well. He's seen me slice up demons and leap out of exploding school buildings, so he probably figured taking a car a few hundred meters wasn't exactly the most dangerous thing I'd ever done. Is it, Percy? Is it? Anyway, Rachel and I were driving along. It was a hot August day. Rachel's red hair was pulled back in a ponytail, and she wore a white blouse over a swimsuit. I'd never seen her in anything but ratty t-shirts and paint-splattered jeans before, and she looked like a million golden drachmas. Oh, pull up right there, she told me. We parked on a ridge overlooking the Atlantic. The sea is always one of my favorite places, but today it was especially nice, glittery green and smooth as glass, as though my dad was keeping it calm just for us. My dad, by the way, is Poseidon. He can do stuff like that. So, Rachel smiled at me. About that invitation. Oh, right. I tried to sound excited. I mean, she'd asked me to her family's vacation house on St. Thomas for 3 days. I didn't get a lot of offers like that. My family's idea of fancy vacation was a weekend in a rundown cabin on Long Island with some movie rentals and a couple of frozen pizzas. And here, Rachel's folks were willing to let me tag along to the Caribbean. Besides, I seriously need a vacation. Don't we all, Percy? This summer had been the hardest of my life. The idea of taking a break, even for a few days, was really tempting. Still, something big was supposed to go down any day now. I was on call for a mission. Even worse, next week was my birthday. There was this prophecy that said when I turned 16, bad things would happen. Percy, Rachel said, I know the timing is bad, but it's always bad for you, right? She had a point. I really want to go, I promised. It's just the war. I nodded. I didn't like talking about it, but Rachel knew. You see, the thing here is Rachel is a really nice girl. It's not that I don't like her. It's just, regardless of whatever, just because she has a side, that doesn't make her a demigod. She is not that person, and she doesn't know what exactly goes into all the fighting. Just because she was on one adventure with them, that doesn't mean that she knows everything. And so to ask Percy to go on vacation even though there is a war kind of feels like she's not trying to understand things. But of course, we all like Rachel. She seems like a nice chick. And we will be very respectful to that. And we won't go rampaging crazy just because we all love Persephone. Most mortals, she could see through the mist, the magic veil that distorts human vision. She'd seen monsters. She'd met some of the other demigods who were fighting the Titans and their allies. She'd been there last summer when the chopped up Lord Kronos rose out of his coffin in a terrible new form, and she'd earned my permanent respect by nailing him in the eye with a blue plastic hairbrush. She put her hand on my arm. Just think about it, okay? We don't have to leave for a couple of days. My dad, her voice faltered. Is he giving you a hard time? I asked. Rachel shook her head in disgust. He's trying to be nice to me, which is almost worse. He wants me to go to Clarion Ladies Academy in the autumn. The school where your mom went? It's a stupid finishing school for society girls, all the way in New Hampshire. Can you see me finishing school? I admitted the idea sounded pretty dumb. Rachel was into urban art projects and feeding the homeless and going to protest rallies to save the endangered yellow bellied sapsucker and stuff like that. I'd never even seen her wear a dress. It was hard to imagine her learning to be a socialite. She sighed. He thinks if he does a bunch of nice stuff for me, I'll feel guilty and give in, which is why he agreed to let you come with, which is why he agreed to let me come with you guys on vacation. Yes, but Percy, you'd be doing me a huge favor. It would be so much better if you were with us. Besides, there's nothing I want to talk. She stopped abruptly. Something you want to talk about? You mean so serious? We'd have to go to St. Thomas to talk about it? She pursed her lips. Look, just forget it for now. Let's pretend we're a couple of normal people. We're out for a drive and we're watching the ocean and it's nice to be together. Percy is so thick, so thick. I could tell something was bothering her, but she put on a brave smile. The sunlight made her hair look like fire. We'd spent a lot of time together this summer. I hadn't exactly planned it that way, but the more serious things got at camp, the more I found myself needing to call up Rachel and get away, just for some breathing room. I needed to remind myself the mortal world was still out here, away from all the monsters using me as their personal punching bag. Okay, I said. Just a normal afternoon and two normal people. She nodded. And so, hypothetically, if these two people liked each other, what would it take to get the stupid guy to kiss the girl, huh? Oh, I felt like one of Apollo's sacred cows, slow, dumb, and bright red. Um, I can't pretend I hadn't thought about Rachel. She was so much easier to be around well, than some other girls. You barely know any girls, Ray Percy. Seriously. I didn't have to work hard or watch what I said or rack my brain trying to figure out what she was thinking. We all know who you're pointing at, Percy. Rachel didn't hide much. She let you know how she felt. I'm not sure what I would have done next, but I was so distracted I didn't notice the huge black form swooping down from the sky until four hooves landed on the hood of my Prius with a womp womp crunch. Hey boss, nice car, a voice said in my head. Blackjack the Pegasus was an old friend of mine, so I tried not to get too annoyed by the craters he'd just put on my hood. But I didn't think Paul Rufus would be real stoked. Blackjack, what are you? I sighed. Then I saw who was riding on his back, and I knew my day was about to get a lot more complicated. Sup, Percy? Charles Beckendorf, senior counselor for the Hephaestus cabin, would make most monsters cry for their mummies. He was huge with ripped muscles from working in the forges every summer. He was 2 years older than me and one of the camp's best armor smiths. He made some seriously ingenious mechanical stuff. A month before, he'd rigged a Greek firebomb on the bathroom of a bus stall that was carrying a bunch of monsters across country. The explosion took out a whole legion of Kronos' evil meanies as soon as the first harpy went flush. Beckendorf was dressed for combat. He wore a bronze breastplate and a war helm with black camo pants and a sword strapped to his side. His explosives bag was slung over his shoulder. Time? I asked. He nodded grimly. A lump formed in my throat. I'd known this was coming. We'd been planning it for weeks, but I'd half hoped it would never happen. Rachel looked up at Beckendorf. Hi. Oh, hey. I'm Beckendorf. You must be Rachel. Percy's told me, uh, I mean, he mentioned you. Rachel raised an eyebrow. Really? Good. She glanced at Blackjack, who was clopping his hooves against the hood of the Prius. So, I guess you guys have to go save the world now. Pretty much, Beckendorf agreed. I looked at Rachel helplessly. Would you tell my mom? I'll tell her. I'm sure she's used to it. And I'll explain to Paul about the herd. I nodded my thanks. I figured this might be the last time Paul loaned me his car. Good luck. Rachel kissed me before I could even react. Now get going, half-blood. Go kill some monsters for me. Percy is out here getting girls left and right. My man. The last view of her was sitting in the shotgun of seat of Prius, her arms crossed, watching his blackjack circle higher and higher, carrying Beckendorf and me into the and whether into the sky. I wondered what Rachel wanted to talk to me about, and whether I'd live long enough to find out. So, Beckendorf said, I'm guessing you don't want me to mention that little scene to Annabelle. Oh what? Don't even think about it, I muttered. Beckendorf chuckled, and together we soared out over the Atlantic. Oh, Beckendorf. It was almost dark by the time we spotted our target. The Princess Andromeda glowed in the horizon. A huge cruise ship lit up yellow and white. From a distance, you'd think it was just a party ship, not the headquarters for the Titan Lord. Then, as you got closer, you might notice the giant figurehead, a dark haired maiden in a Greek chiton wrapped in chains with a look of horror on her face, as if she could smell the stench of all the monsters she was being forced to carry. Seeing the ship again twisted my guts into knots. I'd almost died twice on Princess Andromeda. Now it was heading straight for New York. You know what to do, Beckendorf yelled over the wind. I nodded. We'd done dry runs at the dockyards in New Jersey, using abandoned ships as our targets. I knew how little time we would have, but I also knew this was our best chance to end Kronos' invasion before it ever started. Blackjack set us down on the lowest stern deck. Gotcha, boss. Man, I hate seeing that bird, he said. 3 years ago, Blackjack had been enslaved on the Princess Andromeda until he'd escaped with a little help from my friends and me. I figured he'd rather have his mane braided like My Little Pony than be back here again. Don't wait for us, I told him. But boss, trust me, we'll get out by ourselves. Blackjack folded his wings and plummeted towards the boat like a black comet. The wind whistled in my ears. I saw monsters patrolling the upper decks of the ship. Dracane, snake women, hellhounds, giants, and the humanoid sea lion demons known as Telkeens, but we zipped by so fast none of them raised the alarm. We shot down the stern of the boat, and Blackjack spread his wings, lightly coming to a landing on the lowest deck. I climbed off, feeling queasy. Good luck, boss, Blackjack said. Don't let him turn you into horse meat. With that, my old friend flew off into the night. I took my pen out of my pocket and uncapped it, and Riptide sprang to full size, 1 meter of deadly celestial bronze glowing in the dusk. Beckendorf pulled a piece of paper out of his pocket. I thought it was a map or something. Then I realized it was a photograph. He stared at it in the dim light, the smiling face of Selena Beauregard, daughter of Aphrodite. They'd started going out last summer after years of the rest of us saying, duh, you guys like each other. Even with all the dangerous missions, Beckendorf has been happier this summer than I'd ever seen him. We'll make it back to camp, I promised. For a second I saw worry in his eyes. Then he put on his old confident smile. You bet. Let's go blow Kronos back into the million pieces. I don't know why, but I have a feeling I'm hearing the last of Beckendorf and I do not like that. Beckendorf led the way. We followed a narrow corridor to the service stairwell, just like we'd practiced, but we froze when we heard noises above us. I don't care what your nose says, snarled a half human, half dog voice at El Keen. The last time you smelled half blood, it turned out to be a meatloaf sandwich. Meatloaf sandwiches are good, a second voice snarled. But this is half blood scent. I swear they are on board. Bah, your brain isn't on board. They continued to argue and Beckendorf pointed downstairs. We descended as quietly as we could. 2 floors down, the voices of the Telkeens started to fade. Finally, we came to the metal hatch. Beckendorf mouthed the word, engine room. It was locked, but Beckendorf pulled some chain cutters out of his bag and split the bolt like it was made of butter. Inside, a row of yellow turbines, the size of grain silos, churned and hummed. Pressure gauges and computer terminals lined the opposite wall. The Telkeen was hunched over a console, but he was so involved with his work he didn't notice us. He was about a meter and a half tall, with slick black sea lion fur and stubby little feet. He had the head of Doberman, but his claw hands were almost human. He growled and muttered as he tapped on his keyboard. Maybe he was messaging his friend on uglyface.com. Good comebacks, Percy, good comebacks, please. I stepped forward and he tensed, probably smelling something was wrong. He leaped sideways towards a big red alarm button, but I blocked his path. He hissed and lunged at me, but once slice of riptide and he exploded into dust. One down, about 5,000 to go, Beckendorf said. He tossed me a jar of thick green liquid, Greek fire, with one of the most dangerous magical substances in the world. Then he threw me another essential tool of demigod heroes, duct tape. Slapped that one on the console. I'll get the turbines. We went to work. The room was hot and humid, and in no time we were drenched in sweat. The boat kept chugging along. Being the son of Poseidon and all, I have perfect bearings at sea. Don't ask me how, but I could tell we were 40.9 degree north and 71.90 degree west, making 18 knots an hour, which meant the ship would arrive in New York Harbor by dawn. This would be our only chance to stop it. Between us, I have zero idea how much he talked about the distance. I cannot imagine how far the boat is. I can imagine everything else, but I cannot imagine how far the boat is from New York. I had just attached a second jar of Greek fire to the control panel when I heard the pounding of feet on metal steps, so many creatures coming down the stairwell. I could hear them over the engines. Not a good sign. I locked eyes with Beckendorf. How much longer? Too long. He tapped his watch, which was a remote control detonator. I still have to wire the receiver and prime the charges. 10 more minutes at least. Judging from the sound of footsteps, we had about 10 seconds. I'll distract them. Meet you at the rendezvous point. Percy, wish me luck. He looked like he wanted to argue. The whole idea had been to get in and get out without being spotted, but we were going to have to improvise. Good luck, he said. I charged out of the door. I am not liking this. Oh my god, I really am not liking this. I do not want Beckendorf to die. Not at the first chapter. Or the second chapter. Or any chapter. Come on, I've started liking him. Half a dozen Telkeen were trooping down the stairs. I cut through them with riptide faster than they could yell. I kept climbing past another Telkeen who was so startled he dropped his little demon's lunchbox. I left him alive. partly because his lunchbox was cold, partly so he could raise the alarm and hopefully get his friends to follow me rather than head towards the engine room. I burst through the door onto the deck, six, and kept running. I'm sure the carpeted hall had once been very plush, but over the last 3 years of monster occupation, the wallpaper, carpet, and stateroom doors had been clawed up and slimmed so it looked like the inside of a dragon's throat. And yes, unfortunately, I speak from experience. Back on my first visit to Princess Andromeda, my old enemy Luke had kept some dozen dazed tourists on board for show, shrouded in mist so they didn't realize they were on a monster infested ship. Now I didn't see any sign of the tourists. I hated to think what had happened to them, but I kind of doubted they'd been allowed to go home with their bingo winnings. I reached the promenade, a big shopping mall that took up the whole middle of the ship, and I stopped cold. In the middle of the courtyard stood a fountain, and in the fountain squatted a giant crab. I'm not talking giant like 7.99 all you can eat Alaskan king crab. I'm talking giant like bigger than the fountain. The monster rose over 3 meters out of the water. Its shell was mottled blue and green, its pincers longer than my body. If you've ever seen a crab's mouth, all foamy and gross with whiskers and snapping bits, you can imagine this one didn't look any better blown up to billboard size. Its beady black eyes glared at me, and I could see intelligence in them and hate. The fact that I was the son of Sea God was not going to win me any points with Mr. Krabby. It hissed, sea foam dripping from its mouth. The smell coming off it was like a garbage can full of fish sticks and had been sitting in the sun all week. Alarms blared. Soon I was going to have tons of company and I had to keep moving. Hey, Krabby! I inched around the edge of the courtyard. I'm just going to scoot around you, so. The crab moved with amazing speed. It scuttled out of the fountain and came straight at me, pincers snapping. I dived into a gift shop, plowing through a rack of t-shirts. A pincer smashed the glass walls to pieces and raked across the room. I dashed back outside, breathing heavily, but Mr. Krabby turned and followed. There, a voice said from a balcony above me, Intruder! If I had wanted to create a distraction, I'd succeeded. But this was not where I wanted to fight. If I got pinned down in the center of the ship, I was crab chow. The demonic crustacean lunged at me. I sliced with my riptide, taking off the tip of its claw. It hissed and foamed, but it didn't seem really hurt. I tried to remember anything from the old stories that might help me with this thing. Annabeth had told me about a monster crab, something about Hercules crushing it with his giant foot. That wasn't going to work here. The crab was slightly bigger than my riptide. Then a weird thought came to me. Last Christmas, my mom and I had brought Paul Bloffus to our old cabin at Montauk, where we'd been going forever. Paul had been taking me crabbing, and when he'd brought me a net full of things, he'd shown me how crabs have a chink in their armor, right in the middle of their ugly bellies. The only problem was getting to the ugly belly. I glanced at the fountain, then at the marble floor, already slick from scuttling crab tracks. I held out my hand, concentrating on the water, and the fountain exploded. Water sprayed everywhere, 3 stories high, dousing the balconies and the elevators and the windows of the shops. The crab didn't care. It loved the water. It came at me sideways, snapping and hissing. I ran straight at it, screaming, "Ah!" Just before we collided, I hit the ground baseball style and slid on the wet marble floor, straight under the creature. It was like sliding under a 7-ton armored vehicle. All the crab had to do was sit and squash me. But before it realized what was going on, I jabbed riptide into the chink of its armor, let go of the hit, and pushed myself out the backside. The monster shuddered and hissed. Its eyes dissolved. Its shell turned bright red as its insides evaporated. The empty shell shattered to the floor in a massive heap. I didn't have time to admire my handiwork. I ran for the nearest stairs while all around me the monsters and demigods shouted orders and strapped on their weapons. I was empty handed. Riptide, being magic, would appear in my pocket sooner or later, but for now it was stuck somewhere under the wreckage of the crab, and I had no time to retrieve it. In the elevator foyer on deck 8, a couple of dracanae slithered across my path. From the waist up, they were women with green scaly skin, yellow eyes, and forked tongues. From the waist down, they had double snake trunks instead of legs. They held spears and weighted nets, and I knew from experience they could use them. "What is this? A prize for Kronos?" one said. I wasn't in the mood to play break the snake, but in front of me was a stand with a model of the ship, like "You are here" display. I ripped the model of the pedestal and hurled it at the first Dracane. The boat smacked her in the face and she went down with the ship. I jumped over her, grabbed her friend's spear, and swung her around. She slammed into the elevator, and I kept running towards the front of the ship. "Get him!" she screamed. Hellhounds bayed. An arrow across from somewhere whizzed past my face and impaled itself on the mahogany paneled wall of the stairwell. I didn't care, as long as I got the monsters away from the engine room and gave Beckendorf enough time. As I was running up the stairwell, a kid charged out. He looked like he'd just woken up from a nap. His armor was half on. He drew his sword and yelled, "Kronos!" But he sounded more scared than angry. He couldn't have been more than 12, about the same age I was when I first arrived at Camp Half-Blood. Thought depressed me. This kid was getting brainwashed, trained to hate the gods and lash out because he'd been born half Olympian. Kronos was using him, and yet the kid thought I was his enemy. No way I was going to hurt him. I didn't need a weapon for this. I stepped inside his strike and grabbed his wrist, slamming it against the wall. His sword clattered out of his hand. Then I did something I hadn't planned on. It was probably stupid. It definitely jeopardized our mission, but I couldn't help it. "If you want to live, get off the ship now. Tell, tell, the, tell the other demigods," I told him. Then I shoved him down the stairs and sent him tumbling to the next floor. I kept climbing. Bad memories. A hallway ran past the cafeteria. Annabeth, my half brother Tyson, and I had sneaked through here 3 years ago on my first visit. I burst outside onto the main deck. Off the port bow, the sky was darkening from purple to black. A swimming pool glowed between two glass towers with more balconies and restaurant decks. The whole upper ship seemed eerily deserted. All I had to do was cross to the other side. Then I could take the staircase down to the helipad, our emergency rendezvous point. With any luck, Beckendorf would meet me there. We'd jump into the sea, my water powers would protect us both, and we'd detonate the charges from a quarter of a mile away. I was halfway across the deck when the sound of a voice made me freeze. "You're late, Percy." Luke stood on the balcony above me, a smile on his scarred face. He wore jeans, a white t-shirt, and flip-flops like he was just a normal college-aged guy, but his eyes told the truth. They were solid gold. "We've been expecting you for days." At first, he sounded normal, like Luke, but then his face twitched. A shudder passed through his body like he'd just drunk something really nasty. His voice became heavier, ancient and powerful, the voice of the Titan Lord Kronos. The words scraped down my spine like a knife blade. "Come, bow before me." "Yeah, that'll happen," I muttered. Lestrygonian giants piled in on either side of the swimming pool as if they'd been waiting for a cue. Each was 2.5 meters tall and tattooed arms, leather leather armor and spiked clubs. Demigod archers appeared on the roof above Luke. Two hellhounds leaped down from the outside balcony and snarled at me. Within seconds, I was surrounded. A trap. There is no way they could have got into position so fast unless they knew I was coming. I looked up at Luke and anger boiled inside me. I didn't know if Luke's consciousness was even still alive inside that body. Maybe the way his voice had changed, or maybe it was just Kronos adapting to his new form. I told myself it didn't matter. Luke had been twisted and evil long before Kronos possessed him. A voice in my head said, "I have to fight him eventually. Why not now?" According to that big prophecy, I was supposed to make a choice that saved or destroyed the world when I was 16. That was only 7 days away. Why not now? If I really had the power, what difference would a week make? I could end this threat right here by taking down Kronos. Hey, I'd fought monsters and gods before. As if reading my thoughts, Luke smiled. No, he was Kronos. I had to remember that. "Come forward, if you dare," he said. The crowd of monsters parted. I moved up the stairs, my heart pounding. I was sure somebody would stab me in the back, but they let me pass. I felt my pocket and found my pen waiting. I uncapped it and ripped out grew into a sword. Kronos' weapon appeared in his hands, a 2 meter long scythe, half celestial bronze, half mortal steel. Just looking at that thing made my knees turn to jello. But before I could change my mind, I charged. You worry me so much, Percy. You worry me so much. Time slowed down. I mean, literally slowed down. Because Kronos had that power. I felt like I was moving through syrup. My arms were so heavy, I could barely raise my sword. Kronos smiled, swirling his scythe at normal speed and waiting for me to creep towards my death. I tried to fight his magic. I concentrated on the sea around me, the source of my power. I got better at it, at channeling it over the years, but now nothing seemed to happen. I took another slow step forward. Giants jeered. Dracani hissed with laughter. "Hey, Ocean, any day now would be good," I pleaded. Suddenly there was a wrenching pain in my gut. The entire boat lurched sideways, throwing monsters off their feet. 4,000 gallons of salt water surged out of the swimming pool and doused me and Kronos and everyone on the deck. The water revitalized me, breaking the time spell, and I lunged forward. I stuck at Kronos, but I was still too slow. I made the mistake of looking at his face. Luke's face. A guy who was once my friend. As much as I hated him, it was hard to kill him. Kronos had no such hesitation. He sliced downward with his scythe. I leaped back, and the evil blade missed by a millimeter, cutting a gash in the deck right between my feet. I kicked Kronos in the chest. He stumbled backwards, but he was heavier than Luke should have been. It was like kicking a refrigerator. Kronos swung his scythe again. I intercepted with Riptide, but his strike was so powerful my blade could only deflect it. The edge of the scythe shaved off my shirt sleeve and grazed my arm. It shouldn't have been a serious cut, but the entire side of my body exploded with pain. I remembered what a sea demon had once said about Kronos' scythe. Careful, fool, one touch and the blade will sever your soul from your body. Now, now I understood what he meant. I wasn't just losing blood. I could feel my strength, my will, my identity draining away. I stumbled backwards, switching my sword to my left hand and lunged desperately. My blade should have run him through, but it deflected off his stomach like I was hitting solid marble. There was no way he should have survived that. Kronos laughed. A poor performance, Percy Jackson. Luke tells me you were never his match at swordplay. My vision started to blur. I knew I didn't have much time. Luke had a big head, I said, but at least it was his head. A shame to kill you now, Kronos mused, before the final plan unfolds. I would love to see the terror in your eyes when you realize how I will destroy Olympus. You will never get this boat to Manhattan. My arm was throbbing. Black spots danced in my eyes. And why would that be? Kronos' golden eyes glittered. His face, Luke's face, seemed like a mask, unnatural and lit from behind by some evil power. Perhaps you are counting on your friend with the explosives. He looked down at the pool and called, Nakamura. The teenage boy in full Greek armor pushed through the crowd. His left eye was covered with black patch. I knew him, of course. Ethan Nakamura, son of Nemesis. I'd saved his life in the labyrinth last summer, and in return, that little punk helped Kronos come back to life. Success, my lord. We found him just as we were told. He clapped his hands, and two giants lumbered forward, dragging Charles Beckendorf between them. My heart almost stopped. Beckendorf had a swollen eye and cuts all over his face and arms. His armor was gone and his shirt was nearly torn off. No! I yelled. Beckendorf met my eyes. He glanced at his hand like he was trying to tell me something. His watch. They hadn't taken it yet, and that was the detonator. Was it possible the explosives were armed? Surely the monsters would have dismantled them right away. We found him amidships, trying to sneak to the engine room. Can we eat him now? One of the giants said. Soon. Kronos scowled at Ethan. Are you sure he didn't set the explosives? He was going towards the engine room, my lord. How do you know that? He was heading in that direction, and he told us. His bag is still full of explosives. Ethan shifted uncomfortably. Slowly I began to understand. Beckendorf had fooled them. Then he had realized he was going to be captured. He turned to make it look like he was going to the other way. He had convinced them he hadn't made it to the engine room yet. The Greek fire might still be the primed. But that didn't do us any good unless we could get off the ship and detonate it. Seriously, I will start crying if anything happened to Beckendorf. Kronos hesitated. Buy the story, I prayed. The pain in my arm was so bad now I could barely stand. Open his bag, Kronos ordered. One of the giants ripped the explosive satchel from Beckendorf's shoulders. He peered inside, grunted, and turned it upside down. Panicked monsters surged backwards. If the bag really had been full of Greek fire jars, we would have all blown up. But what fell out were a dozen of cans of peaches. I could hear Kronos breathing, trying to control his anger. Did you perhaps capture this demigod near the galley? Ethan turned pale. Um, and did you perhaps send someone to actually check the engine room? Ethan scrambled back in terror, then turned on his heels and ran. I cursed silently. Now we had only minutes before the bombs were disarmed. I caught Beckendorf's eyes again and asked a silent question, hoping he would understand. How long? He cupped his fingers and thumb, making a circle, 0. There was no delay on the timer at all. He managed to press the detonator button. The ship would blow at once. We'd never be able We'd never be able to get far enough away from using it. The monsters would kill us first, or disarm the explosive, or both. Kronos turned towards us with a crooked smile. You'll have to excuse my incompetent help, Percy Jackson, but it doesn't matter. We have you now. We've known you were coming for weeks. He held out his hand and dangled a little silver bracelet with a Sith charm, the Titan Lord's symbol. The wound in my arm was sapping my ability to think, but I muttered, communication device, expired camp. Cronus chuckled. You can't count on your friends. They will always let you down. Luke learned that lesson the hard way. Now drop your sword and surrender to me, or your friend dies. I swallowed. One of the giants had his hand around Beckendorf's neck. I was in no shape to rescue him, and even if I tried, he would die before I got there. We both would. Beckendorf mouthed one word, go. I shook my head. I couldn't just leave him. The second giant was still rummaging through the peach cans, which meant Beckendorf's left arm was free. He raised it slowly towards the watch on his right arm. I wanted to scream no. Then down by the swimming pool, one of the Dracani hissed, what is he doing? What is that on his wrist? Beckendorf closed his eyes tightly and brought his hand up to his watch. I had no choice. I threw my sword like a javelin at Kronos. It bounced harmlessly off his chest, but it did startle him. I pushed through a crowd of monsters and jumped off the side of the ship towards the water 30 meters below. I heard rumbling deep in the ship. Monsters yelled at me from above. A spear sailed past my ear. An arrow pierced my thigh, but I barely had time to register the pain. I plunged into the sea and willed the currents to take me far, far away. 50 meters, 100 meters. Even from the distance, the explosion shook the world. Heat seared the back of my head. The Princess Andromeda blew up from both sides, a massive fireball of green flame rolling into the dark sky, consuming everything. Beckendorf, I thought. Then I blacked out and sank like an anchor towards the bottom of the sea. I told you I did not want Beckendorf to die in the first chapter, and look what they did. He was such a nice guy. Why did he have to die? Why could anyone else couldn't? See, you start a new book and then you're faced with this. Do you really think I would continue after this? Yes, I would. Thank you so much for watching. I really don't have much to say. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and I will see you guys next time. Bye.